All right. And again, welcome to Teacher Evaluation Part 2, Effective Feedback for Adult Education Instruction with Lisa Bowden, our Teacher Evaluation Consultant and the Assistant Executive Director of EdAdvance. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you for presenting once again, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody again for being here this morning. I hope that you found the last session helpful, and this session is going to take a deeper dive into evaluation. But before we get started with that, as you recall during our last session, we didn't quite finish debriefing around the written program transcript from the history teacher. And we also had a video to debrief. And we asked you to take a look at both of those items and compare them to the rubric and think about what evidence jumped out at you that is strong, what evidence jumped out at you that would be good fodder for a discussion around the helping to support the improvement of the teacher. So did everybody have a chance to take a look at those two things and work with them a little bit? Seeing some heads nodding. Okay. Great. Let's start with the reading like a historian, the written transcript on sourcing. Um, in my understanding, sourcing is to look at the origin of the documents where and then make some um, judgments around the validity of the document and the expectations of what you might find from that document. And so if we think about that context in terms of looking at this transcript, can you just start to share what your thoughts are using the language of the rubric and how you are looking at the evidence that's presented to you here? And if anything's missing, it's also important to indicate that as well. Do you need a minute to get access to those materials?
No, Lori has her hand up, Lisa.
Oh, Lori, yeah.
I will be honest, I'm a social studies teacher and I was a high
Mhm.
school social studies teacher. So this one I read very closely and I read through the transcript and I was looking at the rubric and I went over to my director and I said, wow, am I too harsh um, in my review? But some things that stood out to me was that I thought she could have given more positive and encouraging feedback. I thought she could have called more of the students by name. Um, and I thought there could have been more positive reinforcement. I also thought there were good things like, it says all 11 students were engaged. Um, but I mean, just for myself, I felt like there were not enough pauses to wait for a student response. Um, and I'm not sure that I think she explained things more than the students did. So I know I sound harsh, but those were the things that stood out for me as someone who's taught the same subject matter. And I don't think she's like, below basic or she might have been to me proficient in some things and maybe developing in others. So I don't know if that's harsh, but when we get to math, I really liked that one.
Okay. No, I'm right there with you, having been a former high school social studies teacher myself. I was worried that I was having the same um, concerning judgments, let's put it that way. But it seems that a lot of your feedback would be around the classroom, creating that trusting classroom environment, correct? Um, And so the rapport and positive social interactions, environment supportive of intellectual risk taking, you increase the probability of that when you're providing that feedback. And then providing a focus for feedback. Anybody else thank you for sharing that, Lori. And anybody else want to either tag on to what Lori had to say or introduce something new? Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, I'll say too, it's hard to pass judgment with a written transcript because so much of what we see in observations is, um, not the spoken word. It's like it's body language, it's the engagement of the students, So I found that this challenging in that way. I mean, I will say I agree. I totally agree with what has been said with just um, the rapport with students and that lacking. But I did see that a positive was that I think the resources that the multi-layer resources that were provided to students were positive. The different types of handouts, it seemed like the timeline, that kind of thing. I think that was well prepared. I don't know if the execution of the lesson, you know, adequately expanded on that, but I would say that was a positive in my mind.
Okay. Yes, definitely the sources were primary sources, which can be a heavy lift for, so there's a high challenge in terms of reading demand there. And placing something on a tie line certainly helps establish that context. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have something to add? It is hard to comment on a written transcript. I will say that my wondering was if this is truly a sourcing lesson, should the initial question have been, how do we know we can use these sources to answer this question? Because if we're really if we're talking about sources and we really are wanting the students to evaluate the sources, he or she could keep the question of, was the U.S. planning to go to war before the Gulf of Tonkin incident? If that's the question we want to answer, how do we know that these would be good and reliable sources to do that? And that's my wondering, is if that when this is titled sourcing, if that was supposed to be the focus. And then of course the challenging thing is if the lesson objective is is not aligned with the way the classroom discussion evolved, finding the positives in what was in there, like you did, Sarah, in terms of the materials, chosen materials were good. And Lori having some, noticing that everybody was engaged. But then because, again, remembering that these are part-time people and, you need to gain how do you enter that conversation about, listen, if this is what it is you're intending to teach, how do you know that this is what they learned at the end? And let's unpack your discussion, your instruction to figure out where you drop the breadcrumbs for them to get there. So I'm thinking that might be a good subject for our roundtable when we come together in March, that whole feedback, but we can talk more about that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move off of this one. and then move over to the math. Can I have similar analysis and ideas about what you thought when you reviewed the math video? Don't be shy. There are no wrong answers.
I mean, I'll offer my counterpoint because I did like the math.
Mhm.
And it may be that I focus more on the relations and interactions with the students. I thought that he used their names consistently, which I liked. Um, he got them to explain things in their own words. Um, I think everyone was engaged in the class. Again, as Sarah said, it was easier with this one because you had a video, so you could see the body language. You could see his face, and if the students were smiling or he was smiling. I thought that he definitely facilitated the learning because he would ask, who can explain this to me? Um, and then, of course, it was easier because he gives those little explanations in between that's not part of the lesson. So we had more information. But I thought that he also he used their responses to build off of and to get further instruction from that. Um, I wasn't I wasn't sure if when he gives them the 10-minute break, if they were allowed to work together. I got the impression that they could, because two of the students were sitting. It looked like they might have been partnering. Um, I mean, I thought he was a very proficient teacher and probably exemplary in some areas.
Thank you. Yes, very felt like a very safe classroom, right? And in different, of course, that was again a written example, but you get that student engagement just jumped out at you, how willing and available the students were to actively participate in the discussion and make their thinking visible, right? Because that's what you want people to do. So again, that classroom management piece was very strong. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the strengths, the standouts for me was really how evident it was that students felt really comfortable taking risks. So that environment of supportive of intellectual risk taking. And one of the things that he said was he just named it. He said, you know, our people hesitated to answer a question, and he said, are we afraid to make mistakes? And people like laughed and reacted, and then people like started flowing. So it was clear that like that's a conversation that they've had in an ongoing way about this is a safe place to attempt something and fail. And the fact that that was, you know, had been explored was really like outright, you know, because I think students feel it, but it was obvious it was part of the conversation in an ongoing way in that class. And I thought that was a really great technique that I would like to use.
Yes, I would agree that those protocols were there, or he had engagement. He was just such a genuine person, right? That you really felt that caring from him, and that it was really important to him. Everything that was going with those students was really important to him. So in giving him that feedback, we're going to talk today about the importance of objectivity and recording those specific instances where that is taking place, so that when you're talking and afterwards to those instructors, they know that you were really paying attention and can cite that evidence in your feedback. Yeah. Let's see. Is that Jenny?
Hi, everyone. So I had a question because with both the math video and the history lesson, I found it, so this is going to be my first time, working with evaluations. I found it difficult to pinpoint whether the person was proficient or exemplary. Because when I think about exemplary, I think about, wow, this person is like perfect. And I never want to lead person to think like there's nothing you can work on, right? Like there's always something you can work on. So what happens when you are evaluating these individuals and maybe they hit maybe 70% of the rubric, but that 20% is still you're not sure if they're hitting every single point to make them proficient or to make them exemplary. Like, what's the best way, I guess, to go about that?
I think that is an excellent question, and one that um, evaluators struggle with all the time, because um, it's like exemplary should be the top of this mountain that's super difficult to arrive at. And I think that it should certainly be, a challenge. We should want to demand the best. But again, if that rating is unattainable, then it can be off-putting as opposed to challenging. So in this case, where you know that you are seeing some really exemplary instruction, um, just because the person seems to be very content savvy and they have an incredible ability to make relationships with students and create an engaging classroom. Those are very important. But we have to remember that the CCR at the end of the day is where we're looking for that learning. So that's where it's important to go back to the standards and look at what was happening in that classroom and make sure you're living up to the standards. And where it helps to have some, if you can have collaborative conversation with teachers who may be teaching the same thing, or with some of your colleagues, in terms of what the expectations are to around those learning expectations around those standards. And then I have had the opportunity to be in classrooms where the teacher's performance has been exemplary in my career, and they want feedback. Sometimes they want feedback more than teachers who think they're exemplary, but they're not. But they don't want gratuitous feedback. Like in the case of this person, for example, and you might take the opportunity to talk to him about a learning target. But then that you have to decide, is that going to be a practice in your program? But to start off with a learning target, an I can statement that says, by the end of this lesson, I can, and I will know that I'm successful when. And so then in having the students evaluate their own work, or when they're in a sort of turn and talk or discussion uh, conversation, they can start to use that as their litmus test. And, can provide them with some things to read about that and explain how that would improve an already outstanding lesson. Without knowing anything else about this teacher, again, we're seeing a one-off situation. We might call him exemplary, but if you have a long history of seeing this kind of situation in the classroom, and you really feel that this teacher is available for learning and can take that, will take that kind of feedback, you just go ahead with looking at the standards, looking at the evidence around the standards, looking at what you're seeing in the classroom. And if it lands on exemplary, trust your gut. You probably won't see that nearly as often as you see that highly proficient, but not quite extending themselves or their instruction into the exemplary. Does that help?
It does. It does help clear up, because I was just, as I was working through some of the pre-work, that's where I was like getting a bit stuck, is like, do I just let it go into proficient because it's not exactly exemplary? But then I needed to pull out examples to then make sure I was doing the right thing.
No, I think your instincts are good there. So all good questions. So and it's a good segue to lead into the presentation. So Amy, if you want to please put that up, that would be great, because we're going to unpack this a little bit more, Jenny and everyone, so that you get a better sense of, hopefully, you're more comfortable with how you go about collecting evidence and assigning those ratings. So our learning targets for today, so we have got some learning targets, is that you can understand better how to collect representative evidence from the process in general, but we're going to really drill down into observation and align that with the proper rating on the rubric. Talk a little bit about how to provide teachers with good feedback. We're just going to scratch the surface of that today, and maybe we can delve a little bit more deeply into that in our roundtable discussion next month. Talk a little bit about goal setting relative to the CCR standards, and then to give you some time to listen to each other and share your thoughts to create a common or consensus around what is good observation and feedback. So Amy, we can advance. So we'll start off with goal setting, and you can see I have put down on the left hand of the slide the CSDE Adult Education Evaluation and Support Plan. Does everybody have access to that?
I'm not sure. Can we throw the link in the chat?
Yes, that would be great.
Yep, working on that right now. Give me one moment.
If that's a live link, Amy, if you want to, you can just copy that and put it in the chat. Because we're going to be referring to that quite a bit this morning. So I just wanted to give everybody a few minutes to pull that up and have that in front of them. So if you could just raise your hand when you're all set, that would be great. Or put your little hand on the screen. Okay. Everybody there? All right. So as you can see from this slide, and the guides for goal setting are that you really want the educator to think about their professional practice goal. Give them some time to really reflect on what their instructional practice has been, where they feel that they've had particular success with students, and where they feel like they need to improve their practice, either to increase their ability to relate to students from that, looking at the domain for classroom management, or to improve their ability to provide meaningful instruction around the instruction for active learning guidelines. Their ideas about goals should really be based on student evidence from the past. And so some of that may be performance on assessments. Some of that may be data that they've collected from just noticing around student engagement. But there should be some real strong reflection and what the focus of that particular goal, how that's going to have a strong impact on student learning and for student growth, certainly in the area of the service providers. The plan is recommending that you use a SMART goal format, or the teachers use a SMART goal format, so that they're choosing a specific goal. So it may be, I want to improve my ability to truly understand what students are thinking in my classroom. And so to do that, I need to have more student discussion and encourage students to speak out more in class. Then then they're measurable. They need to be able to measure that. So there may be some commitment to trying some new strategies like turn and talk and then share, or to have them write a brief write and then share, or, but then they're going to keep track of, did in fact, if I started off with participation being at this level, by the mid-year it looked like this, and by the end of the year it looked like this. Needs to be achievable, and this is really important for your part-time people. And this is where teachers become very nervous in goal setting because they think they need to set these super high goals and that you're going to think a lot less of them if they don't. And that, so you're in those classrooms, you know what their schedules are like, you know what the learners are like. Don't be afraid to ratchet down in order to make sure they're achievable. Conversely, if you have a new teacher who, or even veteran teachers who you feel like could push it a little bit, don't be afraid to make those recommendations as well. But again, it should be around data and around what you know of the teacher's practice. And for those of you who are new, give yourself permission to find your way around that a little bit. Remember, you set goals at the beginning of the year, you have a check-in at the middle of the year, and you have an end of the year wrap up. And you want to be sure that throughout that entire process, you're either continuing a rapport with teachers that you've already created if you are not new in this role, or you want to work really hard at creating that rapport of trust and ability to have interactive dialogue by the end of the year. And so you may start out with goals in one place at the beginning of the year, make sure that you're having enough evidence to have a good discussion in the middle of the year in case you need to make an adjustment. Same thing at the end of the year, that you have enough information to say, based on this year's experience, here are some things we might want to think about for next year. And of course, we know it should be results focused. It's really what's happening with the students. But you also, in the new current plan in the state, there is also an emphasis on what the educator has learned as a result of setting this goal, and maybe engaging in some professional development to improve their skills, because as we all know, there's a strong need for job satisfaction. So while it's really important, our true north is what's happening with students, we also want to make sure that we're supporting the confidence and professional satisfaction and growth of the staff that we're managing. And they're time bound. You're looking at the year, the learning year that you're in. Okay. So we can go to the next slide. And Amy, if we can bring that SMART goals setting form, just click on the link and bring it up. We can take a look at that together. So you can see everything that I just went over here, and there are questions in, this is from the manual that I asked for you to pull up. And really, this document is so concise and so easy to use. It really is your friend. So you can see and helping teachers set their SMART goals, there are questions here that you can use to help the teachers reflect. What are objectives? What are the big ideas or enduring understandings that you're going to be important in your curriculum in your class? Who are your students? What factors about them affect your expectations? If you can scroll down a little bit, Amy. This is a really important question under measurement questions. How do I measure student mastery and growth? Because it's not all about test scores. For many students, it is going to be that confidence of expressing themselves in the classroom or making themselves vulnerable to be able to learn from their peers if you're asking them to do group work. Because you've got multilingual learners, you have people who may not be as confident about expressing themselves to you or others. They may feel like they are less than because they haven't completed a certain level of school. So you need to be this is a little bit different. It's a little bit more nuanced, actually a lot more nuanced than what a classroom teacher is doing for K-12 students. So how do you measure student mastery and growth, and that you and your teachers are coming to an agreement on that? And that leads into the data that you're going to keep to measure that. And then what are the targets for the teacher, where they're going to check in with themselves and that you are going to discuss in your feedback. And then there's a place for you to record that understanding and then to record for the teachers to then record their the details about their SMART goal. So if you want to just take a second and take a look at that, and if you have any questions about that, again, you can go back and take a look at this in between this meeting and our next meeting, and we can put this on the agenda for our roundtable as well. And just raise your hand if you have any questions. For some of you who have been doing this work for a while, can you comment on the use of the SMART goals and whether this has been a useful tool for you in working with teachers? Or is everybody that I have pretty new? Because I will say that the goal setting piece is, I think it is pretty important in helping the teachers focus and understanding and taking the fear out of the observation and evaluation, because you've agreed to, this makes sense for me, this is what I'm going to be working on, and it gives you a focus for any interactions that you're having with those teachers around their performance. So Amy, we can go back to the presentation now. Thank you. And if questions come up throughout the presentation, just raise your hand. So this slide refers to the entire evaluation process. Any kind of interaction that you have with teachers around their performance should be evidence-based. And we're going to talk a lot more about what is evidence-based versus judgment. I mean, there will be a need for you to analyze and make an evaluation, but you want that to be because you've gathered data from a variety of sources, you have aligned that data and evidence with the indicators in the rubric, so you're putting it in the right column. You're interpreting that data and evidence around where it falls in terms of their level of confidence in the 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. And then you're planning feedback that is grounded in the rubric language. You should have the rubric in front of you and in front of the teacher whenever you're having any in-person discussion, and certainly when you're writing your feedback, refer to the rubric, because you want that to be your common areas of understanding, and it keeps you objective. It keeps you focused on what's happening with the students and what's happening with the teacher in a way that is concrete, evidence-based, and giving them a roadmap that they can react to, and then continue to do the things that they're doing very well and address the things where they need some improvement. And then you determine your rating. And again, this is different from what the standard plan used to be, which was they got a number at the end. You're doing that sort of holistic feedback of giving them a sense of how well they've done and where you're looking for them to improve. But that should be based on evidence. Okay, you can move it forward. And we should be looking at multiple sources of evidence. So we have formal observations, which you know are longer and announced, informal observations from drop-ins, reviews of practice, where they've been part of a committee, or certainly your service providers, where you're looking at specific strategies that they're working on with individual students. They can bring lesson plans and student work to discussions around their goal setting, their mid-year and their end-of-year feedback. And you can watch whenever you're having staff meetings and giving them feedback around the participation in those meetings or collaborations with colleagues. So you see, you have a breadth of opportunity. Everything shouldn't rest on the formal observation. Next slide, please. And your main goal is to be supportive. You know how hard it is to attract and retain staff. So you want to, of course, focus on their continuous improvement, but in a very supportive way. And noticing those things that they're doing well, and using, again, the language of the rubric for that specific feedback. And here's some coaching stems that where risk-taking is noted in the rubric. You are using those terms. I saw you support risk-taking by doing X, Y, Z. And in the case of that math teacher, by saying, look, who's afraid of making mistakes, and noticing that he's created that safe classroom. Or you address the needs of multilingual learners or English language learners by, whatever your example is. So next slide, please. And remember, it's all teaching is all about behavior, and that there are behaviors that are supported in the rubric, asking teachers to become more of a facilitator or a coach rather than being that stand and deliver person at the front of the classroom, creating that safe environment where students take risk. It notes respect for diversity and the needs of adult learners, providing regular opportunities for students to set their own learning goals. So again, it's asking for the behavior to be that you're supporting those students. You're using language that supports those students. You're giving time that supports those students. And that you are providing challenging tasks, including the use of primary sources, giving them opportunities to do some close reading, which we're going to take a look at today, and text-dependent questions. So all of those here is how we want you to be doing things. This rubric is so concise, I think, and so, and the language is based in these behaviors. Again, this document should be close by you all the time. This, I always forget the form of making adult education evaluator and support plan. This should be your script, something that you have close by and guiding you through this process. Next slide, please. So we're just going to take a look at some of those indicators in the learning environment and creating that classroom. As you all noted this morning, the rapport with positive and interactions with students, respect for student diversity. So again, what you may see in the classroom around that indication of culturally responsive instruction can be what you're noticing in terms of how the teacher has planned the lesson. So having a conversation about the lesson planning and what they were thinking and how they noticed what the cultural diversity was in their classroom, and deliberately and actively planned to address that and encourage student engagement is one of those behaviors we're looking for. An environment that is supportive of risk-taking. I think Lori and Jenny mentioned and Sarah mentioned some of those behaviors, right? Knowing students' names, allowing for wait time, allowing for them to understand it's okay to fail, and really believing, have students believe that you have higher expectations. You can do this. Okay. Next slide. Digging a little deeper into the instructional delivery, looking at the different kinds of strategies. And today, I'll show you a resource at the end of this deck where you can look at some videos. It has a bank of videos, and I'm sure you have access to that through the ATDN experiences as well, as terms of strategies, inquiry-based tasks, and the kind of questioning that really works for adult learners. The instructional resources, and we talked about that a little bit, and then student responsibility for learning and independence. And that is by, again, giving them different fora, whether it's turn and talk or small group work, to be able to work independently and then make their thinking visible in the classroom. Next slide, please. And for service delivery, you're noticing how is that educator really zeroed in on what the student needs and the precision with which they are addressing that need and providing feedback to the learner. So if it's to really improve their reading and decoding skills, what resources have they selected? What strategies are they employing to help with that work? What adjustments are they making to their service delivery as they're working with the student? What kind of rapport do they have with the student? And how well are they maintaining their records to make observations about student improvement? Next slide, please. And so now we're gonna really dig into the observation process and talk about what kind of data and evidence gathering. And we talked about this the last time a little bit too. You can always start in a formal observation, of course, with lesson plans. And sometimes it's helpful in those lesson plans if a teacher brings evidence of prior work that led them to make some decisions around the planning that they're doing for the lesson that you're going to observe. Anything that provides context that helps you really understand what's going on with the teacher. When you enter a classroom, you can collect evidence in a variety of ways. Scripting. My personal opinion is if you stick only to scripting, you can miss a lot of other things that go on in the classroom. So scripting can be good where there might be some direct and explicit instruction that's going on. And you may want to script for a period of time, but you also want to do some noticing about what's going on in the classroom in general. So I've found that mapping, making a diagram of the room, recording the patterns of interactions among the students. I also do a lot of time stamping. Yes, Lori.
I had a question on scripting. If teachers and students agreed to it, what about using something like Otter AI or some other program instead of scripting to record what's being said? Because it creates a transcript.
You certainly can do that. I think it is dependent on if your supervisor allows that, if your district allows that, and if you have consent, if you have to have consent from the teacher and the students in the room. But that certainly, I won't deny that scripting can be very helpful as an adjunct if you can do it that way. But if your only means is to write everything down that the teacher is saying, I think you miss a lot. So yes, that combination of an artificial intelligence recording can be very helpful. Engagement tallies, particularly when there's an discussion going on, who's doing the talking, how often are they doing the talking? And it's very important to be precise about those things so that because you put yourself back in the time when you were a teacher in the classroom and you're trying to, teach your lesson, engage the students, And sometimes you're not aware that in the moment, because the discussion has garnered momentum and you need to focus on what's being said and interacting with the students, you may not notice right away in the moment that only 2 or 3 students have spoken. And so having those tallies for teachers to say, you may not have been aware, and I understand because you were in the moment, but most of that discussion took place among 2 or 3 students. So let's maybe talk about some strategies where, yes, we want those students to have a voice, but how do we provide some other strategies? And that's where that turn and talk or a small group instruction, where the students have an opportunity to talk to each other in a less risky, less public situation, but then share their learning with the group to make it visible, would be that kind of. So that all of these evidence collecting strategies are important. Next slide, please. So I just included this because this gives you a note, sort of a note-taking strategy. So Amy, if you just put up the matching evidence to the rubric teacher. If we could put that up on the screen. So this is an example of a note taker. Well, frankly, I like to take my notes just on a piece of paper and write everything down. But then this is a good way to go back then to analyze your notes. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But as you take your notes, then you sit down in a quiet place and you start to tag your evidence, right? You get the rubric next to you and you start looking for the numbers of times you see evidence that would fall into these indicators. This is a very helpful guide, and this is linked into the presentation. So when you get it from Amy, you can make it your own. But you can see the indicator on the far left. You can see the standard for proficient. And this really starts to get you at that single point competency, which I frankly think is more helpful than the 4 points. Although you can use the language in 1 and 2 and 4 to sort of use to inform how you talk about the proficient. You can write your examples of, specific examples of evidence that you just generally notice, those broad things. I noticed that there were, called students by name. There was personal knowledge of the student's background, but then what observable evidence, words, or actions? So this is where you get to the specifics. I noticed that throughout the course of the lesson, the teacher was able to call on every single student by name. Or I noticed in the course of the lesson that the teacher provided opportunities for this 3 times for students to provide each other with a collaborative experience with the expectation of blah, and the impact was X. So this is where you really get to cite those examples of some very specific behaviors, and both on the part of the student and on the teacher that you noticed. And then you can, you want to have of course, your rubric next to you, but you can start to then create ratings for each one of those indicators. And then I will say this, I did not find it very helpful to rate every indicator for all teachers. And that part of the goal setting is what you want teachers to focus on. And so the new teacher evaluation process with the state does not expect evaluators to look at every single indicator. They expect for the evaluator to be helping a teacher set a goal, and then what they're observing in the classroom, if it doesn't relate specifically to the goal, maybe some feedback that they can get that's adjacent to the goal, using those indicators so that teachers don't feel overwhelmed that, well, I have this goal, but then I have to meet all of these other indicators. So that's some of what you can help teachers parse out to help them focus their behavior. Any questions about this? Anybody think this is a helpful tool? We'll find this helpful or useful. Okay, good. Good. All right, Amy, we can go back to the presentation. And to the next slide. So now we're going to explore what does it mean to collect objective evidence. So we want the evidence to be representative of what's going on in the classroom throughout the duration of the lesson, that it's objective. So it's not based on your opinion, it's based on the data that you collected while you were in the classroom. And that's aligned with the expectations of the standards and what is in the rubric. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a shift. I don't know if any of you have been around long enough to be in, because I feel like I'm as old as dirt, that I've been, I remember when I started teaching, somebody would come into my classroom and I would get commendations and I would get recommendations. And mostly it was based on what they thought I did really well and where they thought I could have some, room for growth. And a lot of it was their opinion. I mean, there was some maybe discussion about the standards, maybe some discussion, but we had no rubric. It was just, they had no tools themselves other than who they were as educators. And they happened to be the principal, so they got to give me feedback. The research around how to motivate people to be their best selves and help them reach their potential, which, face it, most people are really interested in that goal, is to provide them with some hard evidence about what it is that was observed in the moment and get through an interactive dialogue with them, let them react to that and come to consensus around what would be the best way for them to either continue doing what they're doing and maybe take it to a higher level or make some improvements if that is what needs to be. So that is in a top line there, that in a nutshell is what objective observation is. You need to fight really hard to keep your opinion out of it. And for a long time, that was really hard for me. If I saw something that was really great or not so great, it was hard to not say those words. But that once you go to that place, that makes those meetings, and if you're putting it in writing and there is no tone and there is no dialogue, that becomes an emotional, much more emotional experience. And depending on what the motion is, oh, this was great, I don't have anything to worry about, or oh my God, I'm going to get fired because this is the feedback that I'm hearing. It's hard for that educator to be in a place where they're really learning something from the feedback. So it's really important to be able to coach, to start your coaching with hard evidence. So what was heard? The teacher's own words. When you said, it is okay, does everybody feel like they make mistakes? The students did this. And so in that case, I'm going back to the math teacher, you're giving the teacher positive feedback. You were able to, my observation is that, and you would follow that up then with what was seen. My observation is once you made that statement, 7 out of the 10 students in the classroom were much more comfortable participating in the discussion. And I saw this one say this, and that one say that, and that one say that. And so what you're doing is saying, yes, this is what you want. So you need to continue to do that kind of thing because it is clearly opening up the student's ability. And not once did you have to say, you did a great job. I mean, at some point, people do need to hear they are a good teacher or they're doing a good job. But you don't want to punctuate everything that you're saying with whether it was good or bad. You want to give them the evidence. Now, I will say this, you have to prepare teachers for this is the kind of feedback you're going to be giving them, because they may leave the meeting thinking, well, I don't know if I did a good job or a bad job. You don't want them to feel that. You want them to feel like you value them, and that the reason that you're grounding your discussion in evidence is because that is the most valuable place for you to talk about what actually happened and what can happen, as I said, either status quo, better, or improving based on real evidence. So you can see all the observable behaviors. You want to avoid value statements, and you want to avoid that critique or praise. Any questions about that? I do get questions about this from administrators when I meet with them. And a lot of discussion around how challenging it is to stay in that objective zone. Okay, next slide. So we're going to do a sort activity and have you rate what you think is non-objective and objective. So Amy, if you could bring that form up. Actually, might be easier to drop it in the chat, have everybody pull it up too.
I did both. I have it up and in the chat, but when you
Okay.
do click on the link in the chat, it should force you to make a copy. So if you did want
Right.
to edit it.
So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go through this objectivity sort activity and take a look at the evidence. Think about what we've talked about with the evidence, that it's specific, it's precise, it's objective, it doesn't have a value judgment attached to it, and code with, well, it says green. You could do that if you want to highlight it in the computer, and or just write an O or an N next to, click type in an N or an O next to the statement as to whether it's objective or non-objective. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Okay, you can take about 5 minutes to do that. And if you finish, as you finish, put your hand up. So if we don't need the full 5 minutes, we'll move on. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. Amy, can you go back a slide for a second? And sorry, just turn off my timer there. Somebody wanted, let's just popcorn out some things that you think might be objective or something non-objective before we go to the answer key. Mary. Do you, your hand up?
For the first one, I didn't have my hand up, but are you talking about the first one?
Yeah, or any one that you chose that you thought was objective or non-objective.
The first one I thought was objective. After group work, 5 students shared their writing with the whole group. Definitely an example.
What makes that objective?
Oh, sorry, non-objective.
Okay. What makes it non-objective?
It occurred. It's a fact. There's not an opinion with it.
Exactly. Okay. Somebody else want to give an example? Come on, give it a shot. Right. Right.
I wasn't sure about two students were passing notes back and forth. I put that as non-objective, but how do you really know that they weren't helping each other with the assignment? So I wasn't sure if that should be objective or non-objective.
Okay, does anybody else have a thought about that?
I also put that as non-objective, because I thought, like, well, what was the teacher in front of the board like lecturing? Was it kind of that they're just passing notes to pass the time, or was it, about, like what you said, helping? So I didn't really think. I think that just happened in the lesson, not really kind of planned.
Well, it would be objective because it's what you saw, right? You saw two students passing notes. There's no value judgment attached to that. It's not two students were passing notes and they shouldn't have been doing that while you were talking. It's just you saw two students passing notes. Is that something we need to talk about? And so, it gives you a way to sort of push into that conversation if you think that's necessary. Any other ones that maybe cause some confusion? Okay, maybe we can go to the reveal. So, and again, this will be in the deck when you get it, but you can see that those that are in green as being objective are pretty much, they're just recording of what happened, and they have some fact attached to them. So the warm-up assignment was written on the blackboard. I see that. The teacher actually said, take out your warm-up and put the date on the paper. That's about halfway down on the page there. The last one on the screen there, tell me one thing you heard your partner say during the discussion. The teacher actually said those words. Those non-objective ones, the pacing of the lesson was slow, allowing many possibilities for student restlessness. That may be the case, but how can anybody think about how you might flip the observation of that to make it an objective statement?
Might point out an action that a student did that indicates restlessness rather than having it just be that blanket statement allowing many possibilities.
Yes, exactly. I noticed that 6 students jumped up and left to use the restroom within a period of, 5 minutes. And you might say the pacing around X took 10 minutes. 6 or 7 students, 6 students jumped up to go use the restroom. Another student sharpened their pencil. I don't know if people even do that anymore. But you know what I'm saying, that people were doing things that suggested that they weren't. So that turns that into an objective statement. And then again, it opens it up to a much more collegial conversation. Many students were not interested in the information the teacher presented on inheritance. How do you know? What could possibly be an objective statement you could make around that?
You can speak to student disengagement and what students were doing instead of paying attention to the teacher.
Yes, that's correct. And if it was something, in fact, that the information that the teacher was looking for a particular interest in, you can know what the teacher does too. The teacher did not probe the students for their understanding or level of engagement around the topic. Or did not probe the students to ask their thoughts about the topic. And again, that's what you saw the teacher do, and it opens up a conversation for maybe you need to have those checks or give the students something to do to engage them more in this topic. So you get the idea. We can move on to the next slide. So your checklist is, have you recorded facts? Is your evidence relevant to the criteria being examined? So again, the teacher's goal comes into play. The guidance that you get from the rubric. Have you quantified words such as few, some, most? Those can be very misleading. Have you used quotation marks and notice? So have you delineated specifically what the teacher said and what the student said? Is your personal bias coming into the observation through my selection of evidence, my opinion, or summarizing or judgment in the evidence gathering? So these should be, I think this could be a useful slide as a checklist, as a reflection, as you're thinking about what you're doing prior to going in to a feedback or a session, or when you're doing written feedback. So next slide. So now we're going to take a deep dive into an observation activity. We're going to ask you to observe a lesson again. This is going to be a reading lesson. And we want you to collect objective evidence. Make sure then you're going to review or collect your evidence. After you collect your evidence, review it to make sure it meets the standards we are setting for objectivity. There is an evidence collection worksheet that Amy can drop into the chat that you can use, or you can use whatever note-taking format works for you. So I'll give you just a minute to pull up the worksheet. And on the worksheet, you do not have to constrain yourselves to these categories on the worksheet. If there's anything else that you've noticed that you're taking notes on, I am a free-form note taker. I just want to observe everything that's going on, and I find these to be a little bit constraining, but other people like having this kind of tool, so whatever works for you is fine. Okay, everybody all set? So what you're going to do is we're going to observe a lesson that's about 10 minutes long. I want you to observe and be mindful of the classroom environment, but also of the instruction and around content and instructional strategies, and take your notes. And then we will have a step-by-step sort of how do we go about unpacking what you observed and thinking about it in terms of aligning it to the rubric and providing some feedback. So Amy, we can start the video on the next slide.
Did everybody hear the sound? Okay.
Amy, you might want to pause it here so we make sure that everybody has time to read. Everybody all set? Okay.
Do tweens need their own cell phones? I chose technology because I found one article that I really liked that had two components with the driverless car. So with that article, I've stayed around there and thought, well, we'll go into cell phones, we'll go into digital assistants. So do tweens need their own cell phones? Just let's hold up our cards. Should I buy my 8-year-old an iPhone? No. Which is what she asked Santa this year for Christmas.
No. Flip phone.
No.
Flip phone.
Just pick one up. Oh, but she loves Siri and how she listens. Oh, I see. So there's a yellow packet, and it has an article titled, "Do Kids Need Their Own Cell Phones?" So for this one, I'd like you to work in groups of 2. You'll have to join one side or the other. And same for you, Laura. You'll have to join one of those groups. That way we'll have groups of 3. All right. So use your close reading strategies. Go through there. And remember, if it is a pro, we underline. If it's a con, circle. The objectives that I set for this lesson was to work on pro and con evidence to determine what the author is trying to tell the students. The lesson builds to a writing unit that would have them synthesize the material.
But parents are usually the ones buying the phones and paying the bills. Oh, that's just neither.
With nonfiction text, it's important to be able to determine the evidence presented before you, to look through the facts and find things that support the claim. Being able to determine that this is my evidence, this is this point, not just me saying this is what I feel. Being able to support themselves in evidence will help them achieve their success. When you go into a new job, you have your policies, you have your manuals, you have things that you have to follow, and you cannot base it on this is just how I feel that we should do this, that this is based on I need to do it this way.
And like right here,
I'm not seeing any
what Brandy and them was just
underlining.
I'm talking.
But that's our
I completely got him convinced why cell phones are not okay. I mean, flip phones are okay. Prepaid cell phones are okay, but
we're going with the evidence that we have, and that's what we're going with. Right.
Well, sorry, I was giving my opinion.
I know.
Hey, that's like what they're
Nothing wrong with your opinion. But for this assignment, we need to look on.
What were we underlining again?
Underline the pros.
Okay.
So reasons
well,
for
what if
it.
I went for all cons already?
But that's all you see.
I've done pro and con.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what me and Angie.
Yeah, that's just
all
like
right.
with this.
I would go around and check and see who was underlining what, circling what, keep them on track, make sure that they are finding both pros and cons, that they are not getting caught up in, well, this is what I believe, and let's talk about this personal experience for a while. When we're talking about evidence, the importance of evidence is not what you think, what you feel, it's what you have in the document. So, occasional friendly reminder, this is wonderful, this is good, and I understand this, but what does the article say? What do you have in here that supports this argument?
I don't know, my 3 kids is on Wi-Fi. They're in the house. You don't have to worry about them like being kidnapped or anything like that.
When you look on, underline the pros. So reasons for it.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, I didn't get those 2 that you got, but I'm getting staying outside. It's a con because 8-year-olds, when we were little, all we did was play outside.
All right. On the left-hand side of your paper, there are 3 white sheets of paper. I want you to take 2. You have the one just in case you mess up. On one sheet, I want you to write evidence for a pro, and on the other sheet, I want you to write evidence for a con. Okay? You can pick whichever ones you want to discuss to your partner, so you're all writing different ones.
Does it have to be something that was in the paper?
It is evidence, so it has to be written down. Off of that one, yes. We are doing the ones with cell phones. So a pro tween cell phone, a con tween cell phone. One of each. One of each. You have to do 1 pro and 1 con. And it's got to be textually supported. Just the yellow paper. We're just focused on the yellow paper. And I know this is ironic, but neatness counts.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have the master handprint.
That's right. All right, one on each paper. That's why there's two. There you go.
There's three. I have three.
Yeah, I planned for it. To me, the most challenging part of the switch to the CCR is the planning, the lesson planning, putting in words what I need to have in a solid lesson, what I need to reach the students. I need to make sure that there is complexity in what we go through. A few years ago, we began incorporating the standards into our lessons and into our materials. We did start to see great success with our students. It makes it easier in planning. We know how we're going to proceed. We know the standard that's supposed to happen next, what we should have covered before. We're not jumping around from one subject to the other. The first year that we started it, we had easily a 20% increase in the amount of level gains that we had.
I don't think the radiation is a worry. Maybe the cyberbullying.
Yeah, all that and this. Playing outside, hanging out with friends, being couch potatoes. Is what phones cause.
I don't know if I want to blame that on the phone.
So I want you to take these and ball them up. Ball one up and ball the other one up. Once you see everyone has both of them already. We are going to have a snowball fight. Wait, we will count down. Well, I won't throw mine because there's nothing on them. But the goal is to share your ideals with other people. So feel free to pick some up and throw them back. Okay? We'll count down from 3, 2, 1.
Supposed to line up with cookies.
So everyone needs to make sure that they have 2 snowballs. If someone has extra, they can share it with. I have one here.
No,
Everyone got 2?
You have mine.
There you go. Who doesn't have 2? Okay, send it over here.
Goodness, apparently we were the popular table to throw at.
Does everyone have 2? So what we have is a bunch of evidence. Go ahead and open it up and look what someone else wrote. One of the things that we need to do is organize this. Now I noticed some people wrote pro, some people wrote con, but not everyone did. We'll see how that goes. Well, that went too far.
I got 2 pros. Same ones. Keep in touch with family and friends.
So what we're going to do is take the evidence that we have and group it into a graphic organizer. This is just a simple T-chart. One side's pro, one side's con. So each group will share slowly enough for me to type, and we'll fill this out together. So we'll start with DJ. Look at your articles, and one of those, and it says it's a pro or con, so that makes it a little easier. Read it and see if you think that is a con, and if it is, you can say, well, this is what I'd like to have as a con.
Kids are missing out on other activities.
What's that word again?
What?
Plugged in kids are missing out on other activities.
So is that a con? All right, so plugged in kids missing out on
On other activities.
Warren?
You want a pro?
If you want to share a pro.
Staying connected with their family and friends in emergencies.
I'm going to shorten that.
Okay, that's fine.
Connected during emergencies.
You're free to, you can do whatever you want to it.
Okay. Laura, you going to share?
I got a con, the risk of cyberbullying.
How many people have cyberbullying as one of the cons they got? So that's one of the most popular ones.
That's the way I look at it. If you're gonna get cyberbullied, you're going to whether you have a cell phone or not.
Do you want to share one of your pros or cons?
Mine says not getting enough exercise.
Okay, would that be a pro or a con?
A con.
Con. Brandy.
I actually she just said that they would be cyberbullied whether they have a phone or not. I'm curious as to, well, I kind of have a statement for it.
Is it based on the evidence in the article? If it's not, we'll just have to put a pin in it, save it for later.
I guess not.
Okay, so what evidence do you have?
Evidence that parents can keep in touch with their children in case of emergencies.
So stay connected during an emergency.
Yeah, and it says help kids be more responsible, which I disagree.
Okay. So would that be a pro?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh.
It's a pro, but it's a lie.
Yes.
Is it supported by the evidence?
Yeah. So it says.
That's what it says. Sherman?
Mine says can't contact friends and family.
Okay. So now, pro or con?
Pro.
Pro.
Yeah.
Pro that you can't get up with your family?
Can.
That you can get up with your
Yeah.
family. Okay. So who has one that they just would love to see up here? Something that you didn't come up with when you read through it? Something that looks that you're like, oh, I didn't see this. It's not circled or underlined on my paper. Concentration, radiation. All cons?
Yes. No longer playing outside.
Phones causes no communication face to face anymore, and they just want to do it over.
I'm seeing an awful lot of cons. An awful lot of cons. I know for every con there's a pro. So is there a pro that's not up here that someone wants to share? If you don't see it on your paper, is it one that you might have that you underlined in your packet?
Some of the cell phones can be designed with settings to protect your child, I guess, from.
Okay.
That is a pro.
So that's a pro. We'll put that as what? Protection?
Yep.
We still have more.
It says most cell phone companies design models especially for kids. That's
So
a pro.
if it's something like what Warren brought up, is this especially for them? Something
Yeah,
that they
so it's a
can use?
pro.
It was a kid's phone. Did the discussion change anyone's mind? Does anyone want to switch from a green to a red or from a red to a green?
No, I'm
Or
still
everything?
con.
Still con.
I'm still con.
Still con.
Yeah.
You all are welcome to hang around after and have a discussion. It should be fun.
Purple paper, Donnie.
Purple paper.
Purple paper.
Cars. Do we oppose cars or do we embrace it? Or do we go on with the next steps? So the idea of self-driving cars, a driverless car, the vehicle that takes you from point A to point B, but it's just going to do it all by itself. How much are we going to blindly trust technology?
For someone approaching this for the first time, I would advise not to fight it. If you embrace it and accept it into your planning and your instructions, then the students get success. They are going to make level gains. They are going to learn in an expedient way. You will have success with your students.
Okay. So you had a lot of information there. So now what I would like you to do is have access to the rubric for teachers. I am going to drop the standard in the chat for you because I did look the standard up in preparation for this. Oh, hold on. So you can refer to the CCR standard. So I want you to think about the CCR standard, read the descriptor for proficient in both domains for the teacher, and match your evidence that you collected. And then reflect on what you've collected and is it a good fit? If it meets if the evidence that you collected seems to go beyond what is described for proficient, then look at the descriptor for exemplary. And I will give you 5 minutes to if you don't get everything, it's okay, but just to take a crack at what you can do in terms of looking at your evidence, matching it to the standard, and matching it to the rubric. I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. Okay. So just wrap up whatever thought you're concluding, you're working on now. And as you were aligning your evidence, did you assign a rating yet? Can you raise your hand if you assigned a 1, 2, 3, or 4? Nobody's done that yet. Okay, good. So Amy, can we do the next slide? So now you're going to look at the evidence that you've aligned to the different indicators on the rubric. You might not have seen every indicator that was there on the rubric. Look at where does your evidence fit in the rubric? So how would you rate this teacher below standard, developing, proficient, or exemplary on each of the indicators where you've collected evidence? So let's take another 3 to 5 minutes to do that. Okay. Let's move on, Amy, to the next slide. So this, we're going to talk through this, and there was a lot to observe and comment on in that lesson. So please don't feel bad if you didn't feel like you had enough time to do everything. This is just kind of a sampling for us to get our feet wet with this exercise. So let's talk about what evidence, let's move backwards. Let's start with the indicators where you noticed evidence and what rating you gave in that indicator and what was the evidence that you used to support it. And again, you can popcorn out to get this started, get the discussion started.
I think, Lisa,
okay, Ray. Yeah, sure.
What I observed is the rapport with the students, very positive. Even when, multiple times they wanted to use their own opinion, he kind of redirected that in a very nice way. You could see that interaction with him and his students. I rated him as a proficient. with that in my observations and what I was able to observe in that particular lesson.
Okay, could you give me some specific evidence?
Exactly. Yeah. So towards the end,
indicator and the evidence.
yeah. So with the rapport and positive social interactions, I think towards the end there was a lady who wanted to give a statement, particularly on the use of non-cell phones, right? Because I think the statement was, oh, if they don't have cell phones, they can't get onto social media. When I'm sure in her mind she's like, well, there are other ways, right? And she wanted to give that statement, and the idiom that he used, I loved. He's like, let's put a pin in it and hold it for later, right? And I thought, just to be able to kind of use that to kind of soften that without kind of like, no, you're wrong, or how other people may sometimes interpret, how people try to redirect and get them to really go back to, so is there evidence from this article that you in your statement, right? I think he utilized. So I thought that was a pretty nice way to kind of soften that kind of his guidance on that.
Okay, and did you have other, you don't have to cite them, but did you have other specific pieces of evidence to go along with that?
Yeah, I think he said to multiple people, your opinion is good, but we want evidence from the article. There were multiple times he said that, and just positive feedback. This is good, wonderful, but what does the article say, right? And I think he kept kind of going back to that.
Okay, great. The one adjustment I would help you to make is shift multiple to a number. So, and this is a work in progress. You develop this over time, that ability to really crystallize everything. But those are great observations. Anybody else want to give an indicator and some evidence that they noticed?
I liked on the first indicator for creating the rapport and the positive interaction. The instructor like immediately referenced his own children with the cell phones, so he's relating to the adults, many of whom in that class probably had kids, and he's connecting with them on that level of understanding and anytime an instructor does that, it gives just a little bit more confidence or comfort to a student who might be maybe a little bit reluctant to share something about themselves.
Okay, so that's one good piece of evidence. And to make that precise, you might want to, make a quote, the teacher said,
yep.
this is, but you would want to have other pieces of evidence to back up, wherever. Would you put him as proficient or exemplary?
I would definitely feel comfortable with proficient. If I saw maybe a few other of those types of interactions throughout, again, connecting on that personal level, I probably would go with the fourth indicator or the fourth level there.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to build on what Jean or Ray shared or take the discussion in a different direction?
I thought he also was doing a good job with giving students independence and responsibility for that indicator. He gave the students time to read the article and work in groups or work in pairs. He gave them time to work in pairs and turn and talk with each other. And as they were doing that, he was walking around, and when he heard them giving their own opinions, like Ray was saying, he was telling them, okay, refer back. We're only looking for evidence from the article. So it was students being independent, but he was also guiding them, making sure that they didn't get too far off track if he thought he heard them talking about things just from their own opinions.
Okay, and so again, you want to make sure you're quantifying what you're seeing there. And also that he gave them 1, 2, 3, 3 or 4 opportunities to make their learning visible, right? There was the circling and the line. there was the throwing the snowballs, which that was a fabulous for adult learners to efficiently get them to share, so they're not listening to everybody share out what they thought one at a time. It was a great way to efficiently and get them to look at what other people did, again, in their groups, and do that collaboratively. Then he did the let's come to consensus and put the things in the columns, and each time was reinforcing that categorization of the pros and cons and reinforcing, as you all said, the evidence, and then finally giving everything, you know, is there anything we forgot to put in here? And what he did was, you got a lot of cons. I happen to know there are as many pros as there are cons. So he pushed their thinking, right? And so I think you would want to be sure to notice those kinds of things as well. What would you do? Anybody have any suggestions for how they would help this teacher improve their practice based on what they saw and the evidence they collected? In the interest of time, I'll jump in. He did such a beautiful job in the narrative piece, explaining why the citation of evidence is important to be able to do, to check your opinion at the door and look at evidence. That's a real world skill these people will need when they go out into the workplace. Some reinforcement of that during the course of the lesson, I think, would have been helpful to, he had people who were dying to, share their opinion and have that be the most important thing. So just a little reinforcement of the real world application of and the need for this skill, I think would have been fine. And that's a tweak. That's not a major. I thought the lesson was outstanding. Not supposed to use those judgments. It was very effective. But I think, helping that teacher, because his explanation of the why was so compelling when he was talking to the camera, that it helps to do that with the students as well. And then I think some kind of closure, again, where he could have reinforced that would have been great. So does everybody feel like they're getting a sense of, and then, and I did want to mention the standard. I gave you the standard. If you look at that standard, you know that the way it's coded, that those students were reading at about a 4th or 5th grade level. That was the level of analysis. That was the level of thinking he was asking them to do. You, as the evaluator, would want to make a judgment or a determination. Was that level of the standard reasonable for those learners? I think based on what we saw, that would be a yes, but we don't have the context of everything that we know about them. But that's a way to use the standards, is that level of rigor based on, because you get that parenthetical note there of what grade level they're expected to be performing at and what the application looks like at each of those grade levels. And that becomes an additional piece of your feedback. And the standards are so nicely tailored. Let's move on to the next couple of slides. The next one is just before this is the preamble to to providing feedback. You want to move to the next slide, Amy. You want to be sure you look at all your evidence. And whenever you're having a conversation with the staff, and we've said this several times, you want to be sure that it's supportive. I think this is a nice graphic that shows you that when teachers' challenges are high in their instruction, and the level of support that they're being given to help them meet those challenges, improve their practice, have access to high quality resources, they will tend to retreat and ultimately you will lose them. At the other end of the spectrum, when those challenges are high and you're providing them the support that they need, the coaching, the materials, the, whatever else they need to make them feel good about their practice, you're going to see growth. If the challenge is low and you are giving limited support, you're not going to move the needle very much. But, if you're happy with what you're seeing and you have other people that need more help, you kind of have to make your judgments about what you're doing with people. And where the challenge is low and the support is high, you're confirming good practice that you're seeing that you want to have them continue. So this is a good thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about how you give feedback. Next slide, please. So in your written feedback, you're going to select an area or two that are strengths for the teachers, write some feedback that is supported by the evidence that you collected, select an area that is a challenge for the teacher, and write some feedback that will support the teacher growth, supported by evidence, and what you think is really going to have impact on the kids and be beneficial to the teacher. And again, we have one more meeting together so we can talk more about this. Next slide. There are some coaching stems that are live linked here. I'll leave you to have a look at those independently. And the next slide, please, Amy. The adult education teacher competencies is another good resource for you to look at. It will provide you with different indicators of performance, the competencies the teachers are supposed to have, and sample illustrations of what those competencies look like in practice. So again, it's another good reference, I know in all your spare time, to think about when you're giving teachers feedback, but it can be very helpful. And again, give yourselves time. You don't have to look at these things all at once, but give yourselves over a period of time a chance to look at them. And then the next slide, Amy. There are additional resources on evaluation skills on our adult educator evaluation website. That's a CSDE website that has all kinds of helpful links on it. And then the PBS learning media, those teaching strategies and resources for adult educators are also good. And then, of course, you have access to the ATDN courses that can help you with this as well. So next slide. I think that's the conclusion of my content for today. I want to thank you for joining us. Are there any quick last minute questions or comments before we wrap up and leave?
I apologize. I don't think I have the third one on my calendar. Could someone just let me know when that one is?
Either do I, Justin. I thought it was two parts as well.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know either. Same.
So there is a third training. It is not a required one. It is kind of a review. And I can give you the exact title. It's a roundtable discussion. And typically how that works is we send out a survey ahead of time just to see what your questions are. So it's just kind of a follow-up. It's strategies and best practices for staff evaluation, a roundtable. So I will send you the link. It's just a great open forum to discuss some of the strategies. It's not anything super scripted. It's really, again, just more of a discussion. And I'm putting that in here right now for you. The date is March 4th.
So please come with
Just let you know,
anything.
Amy, that's our state legislative time. So I appreciate it. Is that a separate link to sign up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm putting it in the chat right now for you.
Anybody who can attend, I'm just happy to be there to help answer any questions that I can, be supportive.
I had a question from my director. He wanted to know what else I need to do in order to be able to start observing and evaluate staff. If there's any other pieces, would that happen after the roundtable? Is there homework?
Nope. At this point, as long as you're comfortable, you can feel free to start beginning to do that. We are going to start looking at kind of revamping, the teacher evaluation process. And I know we're also going to be having conversations with the state about adjusting that now that time has gone. Enough time, I guess I should say, has passed where K-12, the adjustments were made. Adult education consultants wanted to give a little bit of time. So we are going to now start taking a look at making some changes. But in terms of getting you into evaluating, Lori, you are all set. There is nothing else that you need to do. I would just encourage you with any questions that you have. I put Lisa's email in the chat. Definitely reach out if you need some additional guidance.
Okay. I'm going to be evaluating NEDP staff here in Wallingford. So that's should be an easy one for me. I hope.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll have questions, but thank you.
Yeah, reach out anytime and I'm happy to jump on a Zoom if that helps. So whatever I can do to support, that's fine.
For the evaluations, are they kept in-house for our own district, or is there any sort of like state submissions that need to be put in?
No,
Just
in-house.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, definitely make sure you keep those. They might be a part of your the review process, but yeah, there's nothing that you have to send to them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Lisa? Again, her email is in there. I will get you the recording and the presentation so you can go through and you'll have all the links for everything. Certainly reach out if you need some support. Lisa's a true expert in this area and will continue working with us to do some revamp as we move forward over the next couple of years. So thank you for your time today.